Today, we're getting a divorce. Get out of our house right now. My husband came back home after 2 months of a solo business trip and said this as soon as he walked in. Who could have predicted that he'd bring his mistress home? As I was at a loss for words, the mistress sat down on the sofa like she owned the place. My husband pointed towards the front door, signaling for me to leave. They probably wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible, but I wasn't going anywhere. I regained my composure and responded firmly. Excuse me? This is my house. What? What? The happy couple, dreaming of a glamorous life they'd never achieve, smirked. Little did they know, they were about to plunge into a world of misery. My name is Kelly Smith. After graduating from college, I worked at a regular company where I met my senior colleague, John. He was very supportive and helped guide me when I first joined, and I gradually found his mature demeanor attractive. John seemed to like me too, because he confessed his feelings less than 6 months after we met. We started dating immediately and our relationship deepened smoothly. However, many found John attractive. This was especially noticeable 2 years after I joined, when a new employee named Susan came on board. John was her mentor, but their closeness seemed unusually intimate. Susan, a pretty and seemingly popular woman, didn't seem to bother John either. Jealousy made their closeness appear even more exaggerated, and I suffered through many difficult days. Just when I was overwhelmed by these worries, John proposed to me, taking me by surprise. Thinking he might leave me, I was incredibly happy when he wanted to marry me. Naturally, I accepted his proposal and we got married. At 26, I started a new life with the man I loved. But this was not the beginning of happiness. The glamorous newlywed life I dreamed of was instead a cold and harsh reality. The most surprising part of married life was meeting my husband's family. I was nervous about meeting them and couldn't help but gasp when I saw him for the first time. Wait, why is the CEO here? It turned out that John's father was the CEO of the company we worked for. Apparently, it was a secret within the company that John was the CEO's son. Of course, I didn't know, so I was utterly shocked. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret. But I want to succeed the company on my own merits, not because of my father's position. That's why I kept it hidden. I see. I really had no idea. But are you sure you're okay with me? It's because it's you, Kelly. Have more confidence. Although I was surprised by the sudden revelation, John's words reassured me. Ken, the CEO, had a kind demeanor, contrary to his serious image at work, making me feel comfortable. My son is going to get busier from now on. During such times, having a kind woman like you to support him will help him strive harder. He may be a handful, but please take care of him. I nodded firmly, realizing once again how remarkable John was. What surprised me the most was the financial power of his family. Ken, happy about our marriage, provided us with a house. The world we were stepping into felt so different that it was overwhelming. Father is amazing. I'll work hard to become a cool CEO like him. Inspired by John's ambition, I decided to do my best as his wife. After discussing it with John, I decided to leave the company and become a full-time housewife. Honestly, I wanted to work a bit longer. But John asked me to prioritize household chores so he could focus on his job, and I agreed. Quitting my job is a bit disappointing, but since John is working so hard, I can't complain. As expected, after I quit my job, John started coming home much later. He was probably taking on more work than ever before. Some days, he even stayed overnight at the office. Not even 2 months into our newlywed life, I hardly spent any time with him. Even though we lived together, it felt lonelier than living alone. I know you're busy, but could you pay a little more attention to our home life? I hinted several times that I felt lonely, but John didn't get it. At the time, his passion was working and honing his skills. If we have kids in the future, I won't be able to focus on work like this. I know I'm asking you to be patient, but now's the time for me to push myself hard. Hearing that he was doing it for our future together, I had no choice but to bear it. However, after a few months, his efforts started to wane. John would come home around midnight, and even if I was awake, he seemed uninterested. "Welcome home. I'll heat up your dinner. You must be hungry. I made your favorite dish." "Oh, I grabbed something light at the store. I'm too tired, so I'm going to bed." Without making eye contact, John headed straight to the bedroom. In the mornings, he'd sleep in until the last minute, then quickly leave, ignoring the breakfast I prepared. Cleaning up the untouched breakfast became part of my daily routine. I don't remember when it started, but discarding the food I made early in the morning filled me with a profound emptiness. I feel so lonely. Before we got married, we had more time and conversations together. Now, we barely have a proper conversation in this house. I felt like a robot, just going through the motions of housework every day. Occasionally, John would be home on a Sunday. On such a rare day off, we had breakfast together for the first time in a while. This kind of day off is rare. "How about we go out somewhere? I found a cafe I think you'd like." Since it's a rare day off, I'd rather relax at home. You really can't take a hint, can you? No matter how cheerfully I tried to talk to him, John would respond bluntly. Even when we started eating breakfast together, John quickly moved to the living room once he was done. Still, it was better than the days when he wouldn't touch the food I made. As I hurried to finish my breakfast, the doorbell rang, even though it was early in the morning. "Who's here this early? It's only 8 a.m. While I wondered about this, John, who had been sluggish earlier, quickly stood up. He briskly walked towards the front door. Had he ordered something? I thought so, but when I saw who he invited in, I was too shocked to speak. "Wow, John's house is so clean." "Oh, hi Kelly. Long time no see. You look older than before. Are you tired?" It was Susan, his colleague. Her immature way of speaking grated on my ears. "Why are you here?" "I came to celebrate John's marriage. He's always been so helpful to me, so I wanted to do something nice." "I knew you were coming today, but I didn't expect you to come in the morning." John, who had been somber, suddenly beamed with a bright smile, which irritated me. If he knew she was coming, why didn't he tell me? And what's with that smile? Even if she's a junior colleague, it's unsettling to see my husband grinning at another woman. Forcing a smile, I went to make some tea. "I'm sorry you went out of your way." "You really didn't have to. It's fine. I just wanted to see John." "By the way, is your belly getting bigger? Are you pregnant?" Susan's smirk made my chest tighten. I want kids too. But without any time together, having a baby seems impossible. I'm just a bit chubby. A baby is still a little ways off. "Oh, with a belly like that, I bet John's not too excited." "Cheer up, you can lose a little weight if you try." Susan said this in a playful tone, but there was obvious malice behind her words. I was about to point out her lack of sensitivity when she placed a large paper bag on the table. "Oh, right. I brought a gift today. Please, take it." I hesitated to take it, but John quickly reached into the bag. A tie? Dark blue with a small embroidered detail. "You have good taste. I thought it would suit you, John. I picked it out carefully because I know your preferences well." "Susan, you really understand me. I'm glad to have such a nice colleague." John smiled genuinely. Even if she's a colleague, their closeness felt inappropriate. Her visit time was also inconsiderate, and the occasional hostility I sensed from Susan was nothing but stressful for me. As I half listened to their conversation, annoyed, John lightly tapped my shoulder and said something that shocked me. "I'm going to drive Susan home. It's a good chance to get out for a bit." "What? You didn't want to go out when I suggested it." "If you're going, then I'm coming too." "What are you talking about?" "If you go out too, who will take care of the chores?" He pointed to the dishes in the kitchen and laughed, as if it was obvious that I should handle the housework. Suppressing my anger and various emotions, I watched as John left the house with Susan. What is this? Am I just supposed to be a housekeeper? My frustration showed no signs of subsiding. As I flipped through the calendar, I saw that summer was approaching. Next month is my birthday. Will John remember? I had hoped he would at least care about special occasions, but John quickly crushed that faint hope. It happened less than a week after Susan visited our home. By the way, I'll be out of town on a business trip next week. Take care of the house as usual. Again with the sudden plans. How long will you be gone? About a week? No, 2 months. It's a bit long, but it's work, so there's nothing I can do. He frowned slightly, clearly displeased with my reaction. I'm the future CEO. This kind of work will continue. If you keep making that face, it's really annoying. I'm sorry, but next month is. I stopped myself. There was no point in mentioning my birthday. In the end, it's work, and my complaints won't change that. I didn't say anything more to John. After he left for his business trip, I sent him messages during lunch or in the evening when he might be free. I thought he'd reply to short messages, but if I got a response once a week, it was lucky. Most of my messages were read immediately and left unanswered. At best, I'd get a single emoji in response. This didn't change even on my birthday. My parents and friends called with cheerful birthday messages. Ken, my father-in-law, even came to visit in person. But from my husband, John, not a word. I ended up telling him it was my birthday. All I got in return was an emoji that said okay. A wave of loneliness washed over me. What am I to John? I'm trying to be a good wife, but am I just fooling myself? I couldn't bear these feelings any longer. I decided that when John returned, we would have a serious talk about our future. The day John came back from his business trip, I waited for him in the living room. Then I saw him walk in with another woman. It was Susan again. What is going on? You just got back from your trip, and you bring her here? I couldn't help but look back and forth between John and Susan as I spoke. But they just smirked and boldly declared, "Today, we're getting a divorce. Get out of our house right now." A divorce? What are you talking about? I was in shock, unable to grasp the situation. I had suspected John's relationship with Susan, but I never imagined they would act so boldly. As I was left speechless, the mistress sat on the sofa like she owned the place. John pointed towards the front door, trying to force me out. After my solo business trip, I've almost finished my duties as the company heir. I don't need a housekeeper anymore. From now on, I'm living with beautiful and obedient Susan. You think she's obedient? You have terrible taste in women. Don't lash out at Susan just because she's younger and prettier than you. She's the one I truly love, and I won't tolerate any more insults. John accused me as if I were the villain. If she were truly obedient, she wouldn't be involved in such an affair. They laughed triumphantly, unaware of their foolishness. Faced with the harsh reality I'd been avoiding, I finally reached my breaking point. I had intended to have a proper discussion and find a compromise, even if it meant separating. But if this was their approach, I would show no mercy. Resolute, I regained my composure and responded firmly. Excuse me? This is my house. What? What? The happy couple, still under the delusion of their superiority, smirked. They were gravely mistaken if they thought they could keep laughing. This is your house? Don't make me laugh. My father gave us this house. The title will be transferred to me, so it can never be yours. About that, the title is already in my name. I handed a document to John, who was still in disbelief. This is a property deed. It shows whose name the house is under. John snatched it from me and scrutinized it closely. As he did, his expression shifted from relaxed to tense. Wait, this makes no sense. It really is under Kelly's name. How did this happen? You didn't forge the documents, did you? Don't make absurd accusations. I didn't commit any crime. Then why is it in your name? Are you saying my father gave it to you? I nodded, confirming what he had said. Just as he suspected, I had officially received this house from Ken. Why would he give it to you? Isn't it obvious? Because you're a cheating, horrible husband who treats his wife like garbage. I placed a bulging brown envelope on the table. Inside were several photos of John and Susan holding hands and walking together, or entering a hotel together. I've been suspicious of you and Susan for a long time. Recently, your closeness was strange, so I had it investigated. It only took a week to gather this much evidence because John had been so careless. He never imagined I would do something like this. He underestimated me, thinking I was just a convenient housekeeper. That's impossible. Hiring a private investigator isn't cheap. I made sure to cut down on living expenses to prevent you from doing anything like that. In his outburst, John revealed his ulterior motives. He never disclosed his salary to me, giving me just enough money to cover our living expenses, which barely sufficed for the two of us. I had little money left for myself. Since our marriage, I hadn't bought anything personal aside from necessities. Yet, he indulged himself with late nights out and bar hopping. I had my suspicions, but I never realized it was intentional. You're a petty man. But you were right, I didn't think I could afford a private investigator. Then who helped you? Who put that idea in your head? John, gritting his teeth, tore up the evidence photos. But I had backups, so it didn't matter. Thinking he was wasting his time, I continued. Your father, Ken, was the one who helped me. Without him, I would have been kicked out of here crying. While John was away on his business trip, I struggled with loneliness. Even though I received cheerful birthday messages from friends and family, it didn't fill the emptiness in my heart. I cried through days and nights, oblivious to any sounds at the door. Kelly? Why are you crying on your birthday? John's not here, and the room's dark. Ken had come in with a spare key, planning a surprise for me. He had bags filled with decorations, but seeing my state, he became genuinely concerned like a real father would. While you forgot my birthday, Ken remembered. I told him everything you've done to me. Ken was furious on my behalf. He insisted on paying for a private investigator to get to the bottom of it. That was why I was able to hire a private investigator. You're such a sneaky woman, telling on me like that. If you didn't like it, you should have come back earlier. Besides, it turns out your business trip wasn't really for 2 months. John and Susan looked startled. I found out about it when I consulted with Ken. Ken, as the CEO, had initially scheduled the business trip for just 1 month. I knew it was Kelly's birthday this month. I arranged the schedule so you could be together on this special day. Ken had been puzzled, wondering why John hadn't returned yet, despite his schedule. He had even reported back from the trip and had been working at the office as usual. If he wasn't coming home, then where was he? Could it be he's lying and staying with his mistress? Suspecting infidelity, I immediately thought of Susan. As expected, John had been staying at her place for about a month. Some of the photos I showed earlier even captured them leaving Susan's house together. Typical. A woman with no charm resorts to dirty tricks. Without youth or beauty, you have to drag others down to accomplish anything. John was fuming, and Susan, irritated, started yelling about being spied on. It's sad to be used and discarded, but lashing out like this is just petty. We could even sue you. Go ahead. You're in a pretty bad situation already, so if you can make a fuss in court, be my guest. Susan fell silent at my words, hiding behind John and tugging on his arm. John! Do something! This plain woman is ruining my happiness. Don't worry. She's nothing. My father will side with me, his real son. Ignoring me, John pulled out his phone, intending to call Ken. Too bad. Your crying act might have worked on Dad, but my words carry more weight for the company. Watch as Dad takes my side. John quickly dialed and put the phone to his ear. Then, the ringtone echoed from the back room. Recognizing the familiar music, John's face turned pale. That's Dad's ringtone. Before I could respond, the door to the back room flew open. Ken emerged, glaring at John with a disappointed sigh. I can't believe you. I kept hoping the photos were fake.
Wait, this isn't what it looks like. And why is Dad here?
I asked him to come. I wanted to discuss some important things once you got back from your trip. I had planned to address issues like infidelity and divorce today. More importantly, I wanted Ken to see John's usual behavior, so I asked him to hide beforehand. I was prepared for some of this, but I never thought you were this shameless. How do you explain this? Well, this is... John, who had been so confident, now fumbled like a child in front of his father. Kelly is only telling her side of the story. She's lazy and has let herself go. And her housework is so sloppy that I didn't want to come home. With a husband like you, anyone would be stressed and exhausted. As for the housework, I found the place well kept and was quite impressed. John had never once thanked me for the housework. He acted like it was my duty, so Ken's kind words meant a lot. I've been patient, believing you were working hard for our future. But now this happens, and you can't even say sorry?
Why should I apologize? You've made this a nightmare and taken over the house. You should be the one apologizing.
John's frustration made him increasingly agitated. I felt scared and moved closer to Ken.
I'm the future CEO. I'm destined for greatness. I don't need a petty woman like you dragging me down.
How can you say that to someone you once loved? Loved? Don't make me laugh. John sneered and pulled Susan close, flaunting her.
I never loved you. I just thought you'd be a good housekeeper who didn't need a salary.
John's smile was strained, revealing his own disbelief. Susan, oblivious, smiled, thinking she had one. Fine. Take this house and everything else. I can build many more if I work hard enough. After all, I'm going to be the next CEO and a wealthy man. That's nonsense. You'll never be the next CEO. What? Ken sighed deeply at John's bravado. Ken had considered leniency based on John's explanation. Still, as a parent, he had told me that if John showed any signs of remorse, he would consider being lenient. However, seeing his attitude now, that option seemed unlikely. Ken shook his head, answering with a weary sigh. John, as of today, you're fired. Don't come to work anymore. Susan, the same goes for you. You've both disrupted the company's order and deeply hurt my family. His large hand gently patted my back. Ken's warmth and concern for his family felt incredibly comforting to me.
Damn it. Do whatever you want. I'll live a life of true love with Susan. I never want to see any of you again.
As they tried to leave, I quickly stopped them. There was still something important to address. Wait, I'm going to sue for the damages through my lawyer. Don't try to run away. That includes you too, Susan. What? I don't have any money for that. Then you can borrow it. That's the consequence of what you've done. When I glared at her, Susan muttered after thinking for a moment. This is bad. I wish I'd never gotten involved with John. Hey, what are you talking about? Love should be enough to get us through this, right? Then use that love to make money for me. I'm not interested in a broke man. John, abandoned by Susan, pathetically followed her, much younger, out the door. If that was John's idea of true love, I didn't see it lasting long. Are you okay? You must be exhausted. Take it easy and rest. Thank you. I'm sorry for making you handle such an unpleasant situation. It's all right. I'm glad you relied on me. Now, I just need to figure out the issue of finding a successor. Ken pondered for a moment, stroking his chin, then turned to me. Kelly, do you have any job prospects? No, not yet. I plan to start looking once things settle down. In that case, how about coming back to work for us? We just lost 2 employees, and we could use the help. I was surprised by the unexpected offer. When I asked if he was serious, Ken nodded with a broad smile. Someone as diligent as you would be valuable to any company. Consider this a sort of headhunting. What do you think? With tears in my eyes, I nodded repeatedly. It hurt to be so thoroughly rejected by John. Although I had made my point, I didn't yet have the energy to figure out my next steps. But if someone needed my help like this, I wanted to respond.
I may not be perfect, but I look forward to working with you.
Having survived a long period of torment, I was now stepping into a new life. 6 months have passed since then. I returned to work at the company as Ken's secretary. I had studied for a secretary certification, thinking it might be useful if John became the CEO, and now that knowledge was proving invaluable. My salary increased, and I enjoyed a more relaxed and fulfilling life both personally and professionally. One day during lunch, I received a call from a familiar number. John? Why now? I hadn't seen John since the day we separated. Our divorce had long been finalized, and I had already claimed $100,000 in damages from him. I didn't care what kind of life John was leading, burdened by monthly payments. Still, I was surprised to hear from him after such a bitter end. After ignoring the call a few times, the phone kept ringing, and I answered out of irritation. I'm on my lunch break. What do you want?
You finally answered. Please help me, Kelly.
John's voice trembled as if he were scared of something. I silenced his incoherent babbling. I don't know what's happened, but I have no obligation to help you. Aren't you supposed to be living a beautiful life of true love with your wonderful new wife?
True love? There was no such thing. Susan was awful.
Filled with regret, John started explaining what had happened since. After our divorce, John lost all his savings and moved into a small apartment with Susan. He had to swallow his pride and work part-time jobs to cover living expenses. Despite his efforts, Susan trampled all over him. She was cheating on me with multiple guys, and now she wants to dump me because I'm the poorest of them all. What attracted Susan wasn't John himself, but the title of the future CEO. Once he lost that, she quickly discarded him as if he were no longer useful. I took out a loan to buy Susan a car, hoping she'd see me differently, but she disappeared with the car. Now I'm being chased by debt collectors. It's a nightmare. He was now being chased by debt collectors and was in a terrible situation. Didn't you see this coming? Did you really not notice? What do you mean? Did you know Susan was cheating on me? I felt a bit bad for John, but I knew Susan's true nature all along. Those were the photos collected during the investigation of John's infidelity. The private investigator, suspecting a lot of activity at Susan's house, kept a close watch. During that time, they captured images of other men coming and going besides John. Of course, I hadn't shown those photos to John. Only the ones proving his infidelity. That information wasn't important to me, so I didn't care. If you had told me from the start, this wouldn't have happened. Shaking with anger, John took a deep breath and suddenly spoke gently. I guess I need a smart woman like you. You must have been lonely too, right? Let's start over. His tone made my skin crawl. Sorry, but I'm quite happy with my job and personal life. I wouldn't take you back even if I were bored.
Then at least lend me some money. I don't know what they'll do to me if the debt collectors find me.
He continued to whine, not listening to a word I said. Annoyed, I hung up and blocked his number. Whatever happens to him now is none of my concern. Susan will also face her own consequences soon enough. Susan does have a knack for attracting the wrong kind of men. The investigator's report indicated that Susan's lovers were not the best people. They had shady pasts, including making women work off debts and other dubious activities. Compared to them, John was insignificant. I'll live my life properly so I don't end up like that. I also want to repay Ken for his kindness. From that day, John never contacted me again. Later, my lawyer informed me about the settlement. John had paid the compensation in full. However, the money came from a shady loan shark, and he was now working like a slave to pay off that debt. He worked multiple part-time jobs, barely earning minimum wage, and looked much older from the stress. He lived nearby, but the lawyer said I probably wouldn't recognize him if we crossed paths. As for Susan, she was still paying off her debts. As I predicted, she had been tricked by her boyfriend and forced into nightlife work. Susan, who used to toy with men, is now being deceived by another man. She works every night to support him. The once young and beautiful Susan now looked worn out, with bad skin and a raspy voice from alcohol. I still remember feeling a mix of pity and relief seeing how far people could fall. Currently, I continue working as Ken's secretary, but he has started talking about transitioning to the next generation. Someone as dependable as you could take over the company. Please don't say that. I still want to learn from you. I may not be ready yet, but I aim to become someone worthy of running the company someday. That, I believe, is the best way to repay Ken.